These two massive mounds of mushroom are a type called lion's mane. They are a wild mushroom that grow on trees, but you can grow them also in kits, and I've obviously just grown 2 kits. This is the first flush, so the first harvest, and I'm going to be cutting and weighing these mushrooms to see how much I got in the end. I've also got elephant garlic and winter onions to plant later. We've got blackberries to tie in and a full garden tour. No matter how big or small your garden is, you can grow mushrooms. And typically you grow them from kits and you grow them indoors rather than outdoors. And so now that we're heading into autumn and winter, this is a way that you can keep growing your own without having to go outside. With these, I have them on this metal tray and they're in a warm but dim room. And I spray them with water twice a day. And they've got a plastic bag that goes over them just to keep the humidity inside. And now you can see they have exploded with these mushrooms. And these are my second favorite mushrooms. The first ones grow wild, mainly. They're called porcini or seps, steinpilz, a few other names for them. But these are really meaty, full of flavor, and they are also said to have some health benefits, especially for brain function and memory. So they're a winner all round. I think I'll start with this one. It takes about a month from the point that you start these kits to the point where you can harvest. And the mushrooms start off as little tiny blobs that come out of holes that you cut in the plastic, at least with this kit. Other kits are a little bit different and they come out of a substrate. You know that they're ready when the spines are quite long on these ones, and it's just really soft, really nice tasting mushroom. I've got a scale over here and I'm going to measure in grams, and then I'll put the ounce unit up on the screen. So that's the first bit and it's 171 grams. Now let's cut off these other bits and see what it weighs all together. Oh, that's one big piece. Look at that. One big chunk. Wow. Altogether, this first kit, that's 701 grams of mushroom. So I'm just going to take these and set them over here, and let's cut the second one. Another reason that you would want to get mushroom kits rather than try to find them in the wild is that these are safe. You know that when you order them, they are what they say they're going to be. You're not going to get sick. You're also not going to impact the environment by taking rare or threatened species out of the ecosystem. Wow, this is a big one here. So it's sustainable, it's safe, it helps keep you gardening, and it's really quite fun as well. They make great holiday gifts as well. I've gotten a mushroom kit as a gift before. Now this piece came off all in one chunk. Let's see how much this one weighs. So the first one was 701 grams, and this one is 975 grams. That is a really good value considering that lion's mane mushrooms are relatively rare to find for sale, at least here. And also when you do find them, they can be quite expensive. So getting kits really is worth it. Now with these, what I'm going to be doing is probably setting aside some to have fresh. And then the bulk of this, I'm going to dry in the food dehydrator because I make it into a powder, and it's a great supplement to take for mental well-being. And as I'm getting older, I'm thinking more and more about brain function. As far as the kits are concerned, they can get another flush this size. But what I have to do next is take them inside, completely submerge them in water through the holes I've already poked in them, leave them overnight, and then drain them tomorrow. And then I'll start that process of misting them twice a day. And then in another month's time, I'll probably get a similar sized harvest. I've got two different types of garlic here. This is homegrown garlic from this year, and I'm going to be splitting these up and planting the cloves today. October is an ideal time to be planting garlic, regardless of where you are. We're talking Northern Hemisphere here though. The type of garlic that you grow though is really dependent on your region. If you get really cold winters, so freezing cold winters, ice, snow, all of that, you probably want to wait on soft neck garlics. They're not as hardy as hard necks. You can tell that this is a soft neck because the neck is soft. And this is the type that's really easy to braid. This over here is neither hard neck nor soft neck. It is elephant garlic, more closely related to leeks. And if you bought this in the supermarket, or even if you bought some cloves to grow in the garden center, it will set you back a pretty penny. They're not cheap. But years ago, a friend of mine gave me a couple of her cloves. I grew them, and then I've been growing and saving them ever since. And that's the really great thing about garlic of both these types, is that once you have them in your garden, you don't ever have to buy any more again if you don't want. You just keep saving the harvest or some of the harvest and replanting it. Elephant garlic is a little bit of a tricky one to grow though, and I think a lot of people end up planting it and getting something more like this, which is a mono bulb, rather than it splitting up into individual cloves. And that's because they didn't plant the elephant garlic out so that it experienced a winter. They really need cold temperatures to encourage them to grow and split into individual cloves. If your winters are really mild, or you plant them in spring, you'll get one of these, which is still tasty, but it's not the lovely cloves that you have here. There are a couple of ways that you can plant garlic. The best way being to divide up the cloves and plant it directly out in the garden. And that pertains to ordinary garlic and to elephant garlic as well. Out in the garden, they can experience winter temperatures, they can get established in the place that they're going to grow until they're harvested, and it's just easier putting them straight out where they're going to grow. However, if your garden is waterlogged in winter, so you've got wet, boggy soil that could cause rot, or you're not sure where you want to commit 6 months of garlic growing to, then there's another way. You can plant the cloves in pots. What you would do is divide these up into individual cloves and then put 1 clove per pot. And then you would set this someplace outdoors where it's going to get rainfall, it's going to have light, and it will overwinter in the pot until next spring when you can plant it out. I'm going to be doing that with this home safe garlic because I've got more garlic on the way. I bought a couple of different varieties I wanted to try out, and I'm not sure where everything is going to fit, to be frank. So I'm buying myself a little bit of time by planting these into pots, and I'll work it out later. The elephant garlic though, I know where it's going to go, and I'm going to plant those directly out in the garden just after this. But first, a word from the sponsor of this video. This video is sponsored by Skillshare, the largest online learning community for creatives. It has thousands of how-to and creative classes in topics ranging from art, creative writing, social media, gardening, and much more. The classes and learning paths are all video-based, so you watch a series of video lessons to learn new skills. You can also watch the videos wherever you are, so on your phone, on your tablet, or on your computer. And I just logged in, and on my Skillshare homepage was recommended a learning path that looks really good. It's called Self-Care Essentials. It has 3 classes made up of 28 separate lessons that help you to find and nurture your authentic self and to learn how to meditate. Another one that caught my eye is a beginner drawing class, and it has 31 separate lessons. And I feel it could really up my game with learning how to sketch things in the garden, but also to help me to sketch for the watercoloring that I've been learning this year. So to discover all that Skillshare has to offer, the first 500 people to use the link down in my video description will get a free 1-month trial of Skillshare. You're gonna love it. Garlic is probably the most satisfying crop to grow, at least for me, because plant them now in October typically, and then you don't think about them until midsummer next year. You don't have to do much. They have very few things that can go wrong. You keep them well weeded, you keep them watered, and they're probably going to give you a harvest. Even if they get rust on the leaves, they'll still produce a harvest. I've got all of my harvest of this year's elephant garlic here. There are 14 heads. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select some of the best ones, like the biggest cloves, like this one right here. And I'm just tearing it off the head. I'm making sure that there's a little bit of a heel on the bottom bit. And then that gorgeous clove, which would be delicious cooked, will go in the ground. And I've marked out spacings here. My beds here are 4 feet wide. And so I'm going to squeeze 3 in this way, 4 in that way, and then I'll get 12, hopefully decent sized elephant garlic next year. And I've gone ahead and I've just put these spacings out here just to help as a guide. You don't have to put them in very deep, but I feel like putting them in at least twice their depth is a good idea so that they don't become dislodged in the weather. Birds don't dig them up, other animals don't dig them up. So I'm just putting it in pointy end up and then covering it over. And that's it. Job done. And I can move on to the next garden task that I need to do today, and that is tying in the thornless blackberry trellis. We built this thornless blackberry trellis earlier this year. There are 3 sections, 3 plants that I brought with from the allotments, and most of this green growth that you see is from this year. There are a few canes under here that I can see are still tied to the wires and that have the remnants of old berries or the berry stems on them. Those are the old canes that grew last year. They won't produce berries again, so I want to cut them off and then tie all of this new growth into the wires. So that not only tells me that that's the new growth, this is where the berries are going to be forming next year, but it holds these canes up off the ground, keeps them safe through winter. It is still pretty early in the season. And if you're not sure which is the green wood, so the fresh new growth, and what's the old wood to take out, just wait. This is a great winter gardening task as well. In winter, the old wood will die and it will be desiccated and much more brown, and it'll be easier to identify. And if you accidentally do cut into some of the new wood, you'll see that it's green inside, it's alive. And once you spot that, there's no mistaking what's the old wood, what's the new wood. And you can use this for summer fruiting raspberries as well, which need to be pruned down. I've got some back behind me on the other trellis, but they haven't done too well this year. This year, the couch grass has kind of moved into that bed, and I need to completely replant it up, I think, over the winter. Now, you might also be wondering, why do I grow thornless blackberries? A lot of the other fruit in the garden makes sense. Well, there are wild blackberries here, like most places in the world, but thornless blackberries create a really nice kind of living trellis, a living fence, and it's a great border here alongside our driveway. They're thornless as well, so that is a bonus when picking them. And if you have a really good summer, the berries are massive, they are juicy, and they are just beyond what you can get with a wild blackberry. So there's a lot of bonuses. To prune and tie in my blackberries, I first remove any of the old growth, cutting the canes down to about 1 inch from the soil. Then I'm pruning and tying in the new growth so that only the healthiest and best canes fit on the 3 wires on the trellis. I'm tying them in with natural fiber string and pruning the ends if they overlap an area. The rest of the vegetable garden is still full and beautiful, but the season is winding down. The dahlias and the cosmos are still blooming their hearts out, and I'll be leaving the root vegetables in the ground until I need them. I can get away with doing that in my mild climate. There's still yacon and New Zealand yams to harvest in early December, and kale, cabbage, and broccoli to pick in the winter too. I cut back a lot of the chives and other perennial onions in September, and they've regrown into lush greens. Seed sowing isn't finished for me just yet, and I sowed an autumn planting variety of broad beans today, also called fava beans. Since my beds out in the garden are still full, I've decided to plant my autumn planting Japanese onions and modules as well. I'll plant them out along with the garlic in March. This brings me to the topic of growing winter vegetables. Last week on Instagram, in my stories, I asked people what they were up to in their garden. And there were quite a few people planting garlic, taking down tomato plants, harvesting tomatoes, making my chutney recipe. But one person asked if I could cover growing winter vegetables. And it's an interesting topic because a lot of people don't start really thinking about winter vegetables until it's a little bit too late. You're in autumn, you've maybe harvested the last of your tomatoes and you're thinking, what can I grow next? Some winter veg. But unfortunately, most fully sized broccoli and cauliflower, kale, root crops, things that we consider winter veg, you really have to start them in the summer, let them grow into maturity in autumn, and then harvest them in winter. Most winter vegetables are crops that are overwintering, which means that they're kind of in a hiatus state. So they've gone dormant, but outdoor temperatures are keeping them fresh. And so we use the garden as a refrigerator, at least in my climate. So I can have root crops like carrots and beetroot and celeriac just waiting to be harvested out in the garden. Same goes for a lot of the brassicas. If you have a cold climate, so your winter temperatures dip to freezing and below, a lot of veg just won't survive those really cold temperatures. And so that doesn't really work. And so root crops will need to be brought in and stored in root cellars, in your garage, basements, places like this. So as far as starting winter vegetables, it's a bit too late for most things, even most salad crops. I squeezed in that last sowing of mustard. There are some lettuces like the winter density that will germinate in winter, but they don't grow as quickly. So I'm trying to get my greens growing at least to a state where they can overwinter and then start growing again in early spring, which is what I will be expecting from a lot of the greens that I'm putting in right now. You can start things like microgreens, so things that you can start inside, and then of course, going back to the mushroom kits. You can get mushroom kits and grow those indoors. There are plenty of things, including houseplants, that you can keep yourself busy with in the winter until it's time to start sowing seeds again, which is January with sowing onion seeds and chili seeds. And then later on in the month, in January, early February, then you have your eggplant sowing again. And if you want to have a quick look at sowing crops in winter, so sowing seeds and using grow lights and heated propagators and things like that, I have a video that you can watch next. And so you want to maybe check that out and see what kind of equipment you might need if you want to start seeds early. I am off on a trip this week. So I am leaving to go visit family in the States on Wednesday. And it's my first trip back to the States in 8 years. It's been a long time. I'm just going for a couple of weeks, but if you'd like to follow along on my trip, I will be posting photos in my Instagram and Facebook stories. And if you want to find me on social media, there are links down in the video description. Thanks so much. And if you've got any questions about winter veg, garlic, tying in thornless blackberries or mushroom kits, leave me a comment down below as well. I'll see you next time here on Lovely Greens. Bye for now.